Let me know when we are recording.
We're recording.
Okay. And we've got all 5 board members. This is a meeting of the Land Use Review Board. It's 1 o'clock on June 2nd, 2025. What happened to May? It feels like winter. I'm Janet Hurley. I'm going to ask each board member to introduce themselves as I see them on my screen here. Kirsten,
Kirsten Sultan, board member present.
Sarah,
Sarah Had, board member present.
Brooke,
Brooke Dingleveen, board member present.
and Alex.
Alex Weinhagen, board member. Hi, everybody.
And the first item, well, the second item on the agenda is agenda updates. And I'm just going to note that we may go a little bit longer on the Wood Products Manufacturers Report review. Any other agenda updates?
I have one that I just sent you all a quick email on. We tried to update the agenda on Friday, but it looked like there was a technical issue and the agenda wasn't, the online version wasn't updated. So I'm hoping someone can make a motion to add under item H of the agenda, a case number at the Environmental Division of Superior Court that there is a decision point on based on a communication I received late on Friday that
And what
for a
is
case where
that
there's a
case
deadline.
number? What is that
Um,
case number, Allison?
It is, I just sent an email if that's easier than writing it down, but it's 22 ENV 119.
Okay.
So that would be under existing agenda item H, but it's sort of a sub bullet.
So I think we can add that to agenda item H. The case number is again 2022 ENV 119 when we get there. Brooke?
I think we need to move to add it at the beginning of the agenda, so maybe do the
Okay.
formal. Sorry, go ahead, Brooke.
Yeah, so I move to add docket number 22-ENV-119 to the agenda as one of the bulleted items under section H on which we may take action.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
It's 5 ayes. We will include that under item H. Okay, any other agenda updates? Okay, I don't see any public. Is there any public in Montpelier there? Okay. No. So we will move on to item D, studies and reports. Maybe I'll start. Sarah and Rebecca and I have finally gotten through a run of the guidelines for regional plan reviews. We are about to share that with some of the other staff that are involved in setting up the process for taking in those applications, and that's all for regional plan. Sarah, what do you have for us?
Not much under tier 1A other than that I'm very hopeful now to receive feedback. I've already gotten a couple of responses that Vermont League of Cities and Towns will be sharing out the information with their member communities again June 20th, hopefully going to get comments back by that time. So and then just I'll say on communications, I'm still working on the feedback received from the board on Thursday.
Okay, thanks. Brooke.
On the appeals study, we got out a summary of issues to date on Friday to stakeholders so that It's a comprehensive summary of the discussions to date and the new models that have been shared by various stakeholders. We have organized into that document so that we can see them in serial fashion to understand what the different proposals are currently. And that will be the focus of stakeholder meeting number 3, which will be on June 12th at Vermont State University Randolph campus, formerly VTC, from 1 to 4 that day. So we're looking forward to a good turnout and hope that we can get immersed in the components of different proposals for how to speed up appeals.
Thank you. Alex.
I don't have anything new to report from the update I provided last Thursday, so I'll just remind folks that tomorrow the Tier 3 working group is meeting again as sort of a bonus meeting that was not part of the original schedule at their request. So we are meeting in Montpelier tomorrow afternoon to have more discussion with them, and hopefully that will help me put together a draft for all of you in the next week or two.
Alex, just Kirsten has been battling a cold, it sounds like, and may not be able to attend in person, but as you can see, she's sneezing and coughing, and she may be able to take notes remotely, and asks if another board member might want to take her place in person. I believe Pete said he could set up technology. So any concerns or questions about that?
I can
I
fill
guess-
in if necessary, if you want someone in person.
I guess my question is to you, Kirsten. Do you want to bow out? I mean, it's okay if you're not feeling well.
Well, I'm happy. I just would feel badly showing up with the mask on, coughing away, but as perhaps at this point likely to be the case. So
Oh,
I'm
yeah, let
happy
me
to
be
attend
clear.
remote, but if someone else wants to attend in person, I just want to make that opportunity available to another board member, but still love to attend, but it probably would be remote. And I'm happy to
so I
take
think-
notes remote as well, which isn't quite as ideal, but happy to do that.
I think if you'd like to participate remotely, then we ought to stick with just the two of us so as not to trigger an open meeting. And if you're okay taking notes remotely, I'm totally okay with that as well. And if Pete's willing to give a little help on the tech setup side, I'll take it. Otherwise, we'll make it work that way.
For Kirsten's sake, if she's taking notes remotely, try to remind people to say who they are before they speak so that she can kind of keep track of what's going on. Not that she has to attribute notes to a particular person, but I think it helps to follow the conversation.
I agree. Thank you.
Okay. And then for wood products, Brooke is gonna step in to save Kirsten's voice, I think. Is that right, Brooke? And you will share screen when we get there. Okay.
Oliver
So-
Pearson from FPR is planning to attend. I don't know if anyone else plans. I don't know of anyone else planning to attend for that specific agenda item. I can send him a message and let him know that we're ahead of schedule if you'd like. I don't know if that would. He's
we could
aware that
do-
we had a.
We could do operations, budget, and legislative updates first.
I expect Oliver would probably appreciate that.
Yeah,
Uh,
let's do that. The housing bill went to the governor's desk, right, on Friday?
Well, I think the conference committee finished their work. I'm not sure it's been delivered to the governor
Oh, it
yet, but
hasn't? Okay. Yeah. And they're still working on education, but, Pete, was there anything on the open meeting law, Uh,
Not that
Friday.
I saw yet. There could be.
okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess didn't read the crystal ball correctly. They did not finish and adjourn as we were expecting.
And
Yeah, and I don't have any other updates for that section.
okay.
The open meeting law bill S59 is in the same position as S127, the housing bill. It was,
Oh, it is.
you know,
Okay.
the two chambers concurred, and so everything looks good, but it hasn't formally been sent to the governor yet. So, but I believe the media reports on Friday or Saturday, I forget which, were that there were comments from the administration, not the governor, but people in the administration about the housing bill, and that the governor was likely to sign it. And it was the Senate version of that bill that that it really ended up being, which was the version that the governor was more interested in. So seems likely that that one will go through. And the open meeting law bill, I don't think the governor's office has expressed any concern about that. So I would imagine that will be signed as well. And as Brooks has mentioned in prior meetings, it has that clarifying language about site visits not counting as an open meeting for any board, our district commissions included. So that's good.
Us too. As we may be conducting some site visits for regional plan reviews or pre-applications, so. Anything else, Pete, for operations?
No, not for today.
Okay.
I think.
Rachel, do you have anything?
Nothing else to add.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're still ahead of time.
Hey, Janet,
Yeah,
so one more thing just to fill time maybe, but
Okay.
because I was working on legislative updates for the planners over the weekend, and there was a provision of a bill to deal with accessory on-farm businesses in the way that Act 250 does or does not permit them. And
Yeah.
there was an odd wrinkle in one of those bills that talked about setting up an event special permit that that our program would be giving, but it wouldn't be an Act 250 permit. Anyway, I don't know if Pete has more intel on that, but I didn't see that land anywhere in bills that actually got tidied up for the end of the session, even though the session's not formally over yet. It's pretty close. So I think that provision may have just died on the vine. But I guess we'll have to keep paying attention since they technically have not adjourned yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I had looked for that as well, Alex, sometime late last week, and I did not see that it was surviving through any other vehicle. But yeah, like I mentioned on Thursday, we will certainly do a scrub of everything that has occurred once they're done, and we'll make sure that we are aware of what what is passed and what hasn't, and what our obligations are, and then do any implementation on that we need to.
Yeah, if I remember right, Pete, I think it was in the miscellaneous agriculture bill. And I reread that, I think, this morning, and it's not in there. So unless it got cobbed onto something else, yeah, but understand you'll do a thorough scrubbing once the legislature formally adjourns.
Okay, thanks, Alex. All right, well, let's move on to the draft wood products report, wood products manufacturers report. And Brooke will be the voice of Kirsten here.
I will try
And-
my best.
And will show
Hopefully-
us her screen.
Hopefully she will jump in to correct me. And in fact, last time when we met, when I was mentioning about, we were talking about the 10-acre idea about limit jurisdiction. And I said something about for towns that don't have zoning, and that was not correct. It's towns that do not have duly enacted zoning and subdivision regulations. So there may be towns that have zoning but have not qualified or sought to be qualified as a 10-acre town. So I just wanted to correct that misspeaking of what I said earlier.
And just to clarify, that is towns that have both subdivision and zoning bylaws are the towns that can opt to be, or the towns that are 1-acre towns unless they opt to remain 10-acre towns.
Right. Yeah. Because I think I said it opposite.
It's just
All
said
right.
that backwards, Janet. They're 10-acre towns unless they opt to remain 1-acre towns.
I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Meant yes. Thank you.
She's keeping an eye on us.
Yeah.
All right, so you can see the, I think that we had finished up with the discussion about the pulp concentration yards, where Kirsten had explained how the definition had morphed. And we were recommending, or the board may want to recommend, that those are, that the definition be altered or mitigated so that those would again be part of logging and forestry. So then we were about
So,
to go
Brooke?
into, yes,
Maybe just as a brief update, I'll mention curiosity got the best of me, and I did research the legislative history a little bit. And that definition came about in 2022. It was S-234, which was the bill as introduced, contained a definition of wood products manufacturing. And that particular bill in the 22 session was vetoed, but then the language made its way into S-226. So I'm going to send some of the detail to Allison. So it was 2022 that came about, that updated, or the new definition of wood products manufacturer within the Act 250 statute.
gotcha, thank you.
And then before we move on though, Brooke, let me just say that Oliver has joined us.
Oh,
And for Oliver's sake, we just began speaking about the draft study or draft report right before you joined us, Oliver, picking up from where we left off last week. And last week we went over the recommended ideas, at least what were drafted to be recommended by the board. And also, before we move on, let's just go back and review those 7, is it now? Or and just confirm that we have, a board consensus on them. So number 1 being the fact sheet, and I think that most everyone was on board with that, right?
I believe so.
I see thumbs up and nods, yes. So number 2?
Number 2 was to provide wood products manufacturing focused Act 250 program training and Act 250 workshops for wood products manufacturing and supporting entities.
And there was agreement on that one, I believe. I see thumbs up and nods, yes. Number 3?
Number 3 was A&Rs offering to have a specialized wood products manufacturing permit coordinator and support.
Okay.
Can I just clarify that a little bit?
Kirsten, yes.
It's, as I understand what A&R would offer to do under this option, it's not a designated coordinator. It's offering permit coordination and support for wood products manufacturers similar to what is presently offered for larger or more complex projects. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
Maybe we want to just add a sentence there, an explanatory sentence. I don't know that we need to do it right now, Brooke, but
Yeah, this is a PDF. I don't
Yeah,
have a Word
right.
version in front of
So-
me.
Kirsten can make a note of that. All right, number 4, A, B, C, D.
Yeah, so number 4 talks about Rule 19 presumptions, where an A&R, underlying A&R permit, whether or not we can update those presumptions to refer to the current relevant A&R permits. I guess Rule 19 is out of date, so that it needs to be updated to make sure that all of those presumptions are covered. And then to determine and identify whether any of those permits may be obtained or concluded after Act 250 permitting, which is something we've heard regularly from wood products folks. Not to have to wait for the approval, but like a condition subsequent kind of idea. And then determine and identify whether any of the ancillary permits may be dispositive, meaning is it consistent as between the A&R permitting and the Act 250 criterion that it's satisfying the presumption for, whether or not there's an overlap in whole or if there are differences between them. Then we also, should I stop there and make sure?
Yeah,
everyone's-
and I think there was agreement on that, correct? Yes, okay. So B.
And that's about reviewing and updating Act 250 Rule 34. This has to do with the thresholds for substantial material changes that trigger whether or not you need an amended permit under Act 250. And we want to be able to determine if and when an Act 250 permit or amendments are triggered for wood products manufacturers specifically, when the purpose of a change is to reduce impacts. So to alleviate the need to go through that process when you're actually reducing the impact of the project. So I think everyone was on board with that. And then C, whoops.
Go ahead, C.
Okay. And then C is Rule 34D, which is to basically like look at the administrative amendments to see if that could be expanded, which provides more than just, a records keeping alteration, something that is not going to impact the adverse, will not create other adverse impacts. So to see if administrative amendments can be used more expansively. I think everyone was in favor of that. And then we have evaluate the use of Rule 16D, which is talks about informal and non-adversarial resolution for folks to come together. And that's available now, but it's to determine if more specific guidance or training would be helpful in terms of dealing with commissions, commission chairs, and the coordinators as well. The board is going to, or we're recommending the board develop 16D guidance to offer related training as well to our staff. I think we're all in favor of that. Then we have number 5 is information regarding logging forestry benefits, the Stony Brook project area. We talked about this. Folks were talking about an automatic Stony Brook where a portion of the property is not the entire tract is utilized for a particular project. And due to the nature of having to define that area, this is sort of like subdividing property without subdividing it. It's a delineation of an area of the property that would be under Act 250 jurisdiction absent the rest of the tract. And so the upshot is that there are aspects of this that require a process to go through, and it isn't something that lends itself to automatic triggering, because that delineation needs to happen, and within the delineation it needs to be determined whether there are any potential impacts or overlap to permit conditions on a different part of the property, etc. Then in number 6, we talked about.
See, Oliver has his hand up, Brooke.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Oliver, I wasn't looking at that screen.
That's okay. Hi, Brooke. I'll just introduce myself. My name's Oliver Pearson. I'm the director for forests within Forest Parks and Rec. And as folks are probably aware, FPR under statute, it was tasked with working in consultation with the Land Use Review Board to develop this report. And my colleague, Catherine Servideo, other FPR staff, and I have worked closely with Kirsten and Brooke over the past few months to contribute to this report. I do have some general comments which I can share in writing if we're going through the report now. I'm happy to share those in writing with all the board members after the meeting, and I can only stick around until 2. So I defer to the chair to how they want to proceed on that. On this specific issue that we were just talking about, I understand what Brooke's point. I think that FPR, is very much in favor of adopting a uniform and expedited use of Stony Brook in forest products permitting, and that's feedback we've received from folks in the industry as well. And I think that this might be a language issue, because I know that some level of review would still need to be conducted. We feel that the Stony Brook determination, if possible under statute or perhaps via recommendation in the report to change statute, this process should be applied automatically rather than simply offered as a path to the applicant. And it would be a process that would inform an eventual determination of applicability of the whole permit process. So that's our take on the Stony Brook question. And I think there's a little bit of daylight between what our recommendation and thinking is on this and the current text of the report. So I'll stop there on Stony Brook, and happy to discuss other comments further or just send them in writing after the meeting.
Oliver, I think if you could send them in writing, we will need to post them on our website for discussion at our next meeting. So if you could forward them to Maddie Cotter, and she can get that posted as material for our next meeting, because we can't really confer together outside of a meeting on those. So
Sure. Yeah. And
Okay.
If time had permitted this meeting or last meeting, I would have shared them verbally, but
Yeah.
we can perhaps share them in writing and discuss them next time. That sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So I didn't mean to speed through the different items, because there were specific requests or suggestions within number 5, and we should mention those in case Oliver wants to specifically mention FPR's position on them. So I think item number 1 was to provides the similar benefits or treatment of forestry and logging like agriculture is. And to my recollection, the board was in favor of pursuing that type of, obviously the language would need to be wordsmith, but is that my recollection correct in terms of pursuing that?
Similar to farming, yeah.
Right, and our position, I believe, as Kirsten tried to articulate her recommendation, our recommendation is that so long as existing permitting conditions are not invaded or disrupted in any way, that was the issue I think that we called out of concern, is that we didn't want to negate any permits or existing conditions of permits on any properties.
Which basically would refer to things like protecting conditioned no-cut zones for existing projects under our jurisdiction.
Right, like stream buffers or buffers that are for aesthetic purposes, whatever. We didn't want to see any kind of impairment to existing permits.
Right.
Let's see. The default issue is discussed in item number 2. And that's where I think we need to maybe look more carefully at what is required versus Oliver's approach or FPR's approach to see if that daylight can be bridged. Let's
And then that's the third there.
the third one, yeah, I guess, yeah, for number 3. Number 3 is they were asking for an exemption of forestry below 2,500 feet with existing permits. So again, that is the I think that goes again to the issue of existing conditions, whether or not tree cutting and forestry is the same and logging is the same, or can invade one versus the other. You want to jump in here, Kirsten, because I'm not sure that I'm explaining this clearly enough.
Maybe I'll let Oliver go first, and then I'll do my best to
That's fine.
explain my understanding of this topic.
Go ahead, Oliver.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I think on this issue, explicit exemption for forestry and logging under 2,500 feet. I think this draft moves in the right direction regarding benefits mirrored to farming exemptions, and to this point, FBR believes, as our interpretation of statute, that there is an explicit exemption for forestry and logging under 2,500 feet, but this may be a necessary reform through this that this report should recommend, given that I think there's still some differences of interpretation there. But we feel that Act 250 should not and does not govern the practice of forestry, and that land clearing and tree cutting is certainly not forestry as we understand the various statutes that are out there. And so, this report continues to use the terms tree clearing and tree cutting, but those are terms that we think really should be removed from the report, because we're really the charge from the statute is logging and forestry, and again, that's the subject of our recommendations and comments. But tree clearing and tree cutting are different. Those are more associated with development and conversion of land, and logging and forestry is sustainable management of forests that keeps forests intact after the logging or cutting or logging or forestry activity, has taken place. So, I think there are some specific language changes that we've suggested in a previous comments rather to the Land Use Review Board, and in what we submit after this meeting, we'll make those language change suggestions again, so that we hopefully capture the use of that terminology as appropriately as possible. Thank you.
Oliver, if the tree clearing terminology is only used in reference to existing Act 250 permit conditions that may have used that language, is that, and I'm not sure if that was the case, Kirsten, but I would think that that would be an exception to your objection.
That's certainly possible. I have to think about that a little bit.
Okay.
But that's certainly possible. So yeah, let me review that and get back to you.
Okay. And Kirsten, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the two can be, I mean, this is my own understanding of this whole topic. I think that some tree cutting can be undertaken as logging and forestry, and conversely, logging and forestry in of itself can encompass tree cutting. So I think that unless we have definitions or spell it out more definitively, it's going to continue to be a topic that maybe is not well understood. In terms of this request and proposal to exempt forestry and logging, on all existing Act 250 permit conditions. There was concern that that might negate some existing Act 250 permit obligations that were put in place previously to mitigate impacts that otherwise would have occurred under the Act 250 criteria for regulated development activity. So this would need to be done in a way that doesn't conflict with the district commission's ability to include restrictions on tree cutting where needed to address impacts under the Act 250 criteria, and in a way that doesn't negate existing permit obligations.
Yeah.
But, Oliver's certainly happy to continue working on, some wording, and maybe there's ways to just make this more clear.
Yeah, I think we agree. There are ways to do that, and we do have statutory definitions for things like forestry operations, logging that we use to guide our oversight of those activities on state and private land, and none of them are sort of as closely linked with development and conversion as sort of the definitions of tree clearing and cutting as we understand them. So yeah, I agree, Kirsten, that I think we can continue to work through it. I think the challenge we have is this is a report focused on wood products manufacturing, and Act 250 is one of the permits that's in play. There's Agency of Natural Resource permits that are in play, and typically what's done to provide the wood for wood products, not exclusively but largely, is our forestry operations and logging, and the linkage between wood products and land conversion and clearing is more nebulous. So I think it is important to get this connection as close and correct as possible.
Thank you, Oliver. All right, number 6.
Number 6 relates to funding either a permit specialist or ombudsman with regulatory expertise. And this would be to support applicants and prospective applicants and others that might participate. So we talked about this last time, and the notion in terms of just for a wood products manufacturing purpose did not seem viable to the group. So this relates also to the work that's going on in the appeals study. And so we may be pursuing this kind of permit specialist or make a recommendation for that in the appeals study. We did talk about that at Wood Products. So that idea may advance more in the other study as opposed to this one, because it was not seen viable just for wood products.
Sarah.
So I think I was somewhat in agreement with this, but wanted to make it a little bit more nebulous and not as specific as to like a person, and stating that, identifying that there is an issue and there's a need to solve this, but not make it very specific in terms of recommendations of people or positions.
And one of the study topics in our appeals study is going to be what is needed, because we're trying to look at it across different permitting programs. Is it an office? Is it a person? How many, that kind of thing. And to roll that in with our EJ responsibilities. So yeah, there will be a lot more information shared and ideas thrown around in that regard.
And so this number 6 item suggests that the board is supportive of advocating for that. And if I'm remembering correctly, there was a little bit of from our last meeting of a suggestion that maybe it would be a potential that we would advocate for it, but not a clear, absolutely, we're going to advocate for this. Was that right? Okay,
Yes, I think so.
so there would
I
be a
believe
little bit of
that's-
a rewording here to make it a little less certain that we would be advocating for that.
I think we said somewhere in here that it's likely we would or something, and so I
Oh,
think
yeah,
we're,
board will likely pursue, so
yeah, May, I think we're going to replace
we were
it
gonna
with.
change, yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. Number 7.
Okay, and this was the log and our pulp concentration yards. I think that we covered this before Oliver got in, but let's let Oliver speak about it.
Yeah, just sorry, briefly on the ombudsperson, we think that's a
Oh,
good
yeah.
idea. I think the A&R, the earlier recommendation about A&R providing special, let's call it concierge service to applicants, might just need to be contextualized if the ombudsperson also is successfully, obtained, in how those two would interact. I think as I read it, I saw A&R is going to provide some concierge service. Is that just for A&R permits, or does it also include facilitating with commissioners under the land use review board? And same question would the ombudsperson, if ever successfully obtained, only focus on the Act 250 process, or will they also do some crosswalking with A&R for those permits? So I just think that we might want to clarify those points, but I support both of those recommendations.
Might it be, Oliver, that if there were this office of the ombudsperson established at some point, you might not need the other?
I think that's certainly possible.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, we might want to just mention that. But I think, if the ombudsperson or office was established, it may be that the A&R concierge service was less important, but we might want to allow the planning office who made that offer, that's Billy Coster and Jen Mojo, the ability to still support, obtaining relevant A&R permits if that's something that needs to be done from inside A&R as opposed to from someone at the Land Use Review Board.
And then Oliver, we went over briefly the log and our pulp concentration yards. Kirsten did, I don't know if you were here when she was talking about, it was legislation in 2022 that altered the definition. And I think you guys are supportive of this recommendation.
That created a definition in the first instance.
Right, and included log and pulp concentration yards in that definition.
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, and that this is a recommendation to remove log and pulp concentration yards from the wood products manufacturer's definition. And I think that the board wasn't in total agreement on this, and I think Sarah in particular would like more information. And so I wondered if we could just look at this with a little bit of rewording that says that the board will be looking into the advisability of removing log and pulp concentration yards from the wood products manufacturer's definition. Is that right, Sarah? Were you still feeling that you wouldn't be ready to basically revert back to the way things were before 2022 and remove log and pulp concentration yards from the definition?
So I did have some questions
Mhm.
around instances and sizes of operations. I wasn't willing to make a decision either way yet, but just had questions around what we're looking at for sizes. And I think what Kirsten said in terms of researching, it's sort of hard to do. I'm sorry, I'm trying not to make Kirsten speak, but perhaps Kirsten, you can, when you have a chance to come up for air, I think you had a good counter to that in terms of what's possible for additional
Well, and I think
information.
what I had recommended is just a little bit of wordsmithing to make this something that we would continue to look into rather than a decided consensus recommendation at this point.
Kirsten?
So just to mention too, if you scroll down further, Brooke and I had contemplated whether or not, if log and pulp concentration yards are removed from the definition and basically the exemption or to treat those as a component of logging and forestry as had been the case historically prior to 2022, whether or not that would occur under some, circumstances or conditions or factors. These would be examples of things that one might consider. But, we haven't really ourselves, I don't think, Brooke, that I feel free to jump in here, sort of reach a definitive kind of recommendation for that. And would be interested in, possible more discussion about this. But I think Oliver and FPR had some thoughts about this too that you may want to hear.
Go ahead,
Sure. I mean,
Oliver, if you do.
yeah, in general, we think this is a good recommendation and we support it. It's a step in the right direction. We had some, the devil's always in the details, so we had some thoughts on it, as Kirsten mentioned. We think, if there are these changes, that we need to make sure that the changes still allow the existing and necessary functions that happen at log and pulp yards to continue to take place, such as trimming logs. Then we had some questions about, exactly what the authors, Kirsten and Brooke, meant by the use of the word enhanced, but I think we can quickly resolve that offline. And there was parts of linking this with tier 1 and tier 3 that we had some questions about, and wondering if perhaps the tier 3 language was a bit premature, given that process is still very much underway, as you all know, through a separate effort. And I'm just wondering about some of the 300-foot language from a school and a residence and where that came from. But overall, we're supportive of this idea and just would want to chat through some details before the report is finalized.
Yeah, and I think that sort of the tier 3 issue sort of underscores that, maybe this isn't ready for a full-fledged recommendation yet, and it's something that the board intends to keep working on, and not hold up this report because we don't have all these answers yet to make this a direct recommendation. Does that, go ahead, Brooke.
Do we want to move on? Or are we good on that one?
Well, let's
Yeah.
just, let me just get a sort of thumbs up sort of perspective from each board member. Does that reflect, as we summarize this today, does that sort of reflect where everybody feels comfortable? Alex?
It works for me, Janet, but I think with the rework and the shortening that you just mentioned, that this report shouldn't be the vehicle to discuss all the potential
Right.
pieces or provisions of a new log and pulp yard definition. Rather, we make the report state that we need to address the issue. There are a number of ways to do it, and the board's committed to further research and figuring that out. I'm supportive of revising the report with that in mind, and I'll just reiterate for Oliver's benefit what I remember saying at the last meeting, which was, as we evaluate these options in the future, I'm pretty enthusiastic about FPR's recommended option, which is, get log and pulp concentration yards out of the wood products manufacturing definition, define them separately. And it's in that work that we have, some more questions to answer, and we can put forward something to the legislature come fall.
Okay. I see Kirsten is taking notes. Maybe reach out to Alex if you feel he might be helpful in wording that section or that number 7 recommendation, Kirsten? And Sarah too. Okay, so other ideas that were examined but not currently recommended by this board. Go ahead, Brooke.
And we've touched on a number of these in our discussions on ideas that are being recommended or we're suggesting so. So the first one was develop an Act 250 application form customized specifically for wood products manufacturers. I think given the number of applications as well as the numerous other project types, which applications are filed for, our suggestion is it would not be cost effective or justified to develop an application just for wood products. It's hard to anticipate what is going to come under an Act 250 permit for any specific project in the abstract. So we felt like this was perhaps not something that resources should suggest that we pursue.
And it really seems like the fact sheet and guidance document that we are recommending we develop will accomplish, in my mind, the same goal. So I'm happy with just doing that.
Okay. So we're okay on this one? Are people in agreement?
Yes.
B, we were just talking about the permit specialist or ombuds person or office just for wood products. Again, having a broader ability to serve all folks would be more useful, we believe, in this context. So I think we're all okay on that one.
Yeah.
Now, C is was board to develop an operational industrial noise standard as a rebuttable presumption to address noise under criterion 8. So this was an idea that Kirsten and I actually proposed based on there's a new noise standard at the Public Utility Commission, for example, for wind turbines. Now, we were not in this context suggesting a noise standard that you had to comply with. What we were suggesting is sort of a fast pass. If you could comply with a noise standard, and we then developed it, what about in an industrial setting? If you're in an industrial park, for example, would it be beneficial to wood products manufacturers to utilize the limits of the industrial park, not just the project site that the wood products manufacturer might be on? And then to have automatic standards where if you come in under those standards, you had the presumption that you were okay on noise as a rebuttable presumption, which is we don't have a noise standard or a presumption in Act 250. So that's kind of, we were trying to figure out, is there a way to make it standardized but not mandatory on anyone? The idea was this would be something they could utilize and voluntarily say, hey, you know what, we can get a fast pass around noise because we're going to do it and we can prove it's going to be under X. But there wasn't really support for this notion. And I'm not sure if it's the idea of voluntarily, imposing regulatory conditions or the idea was trying to find something that benefited the industry, but we don't think that it certainly was not embraced. So we're not recommending to go forward on it.
Kirsten.
Yeah, just to clarify, this was in response to challenges and ideas that were generated by the stakeholder group as a whole. This wasn't just sort of Ian Brooke. This was the challenge of addressing and minimizing neighbor concerns. coupled with the idea that was mentioned by a different participant to develop standard conditions as rebuttable presumptions. And conceptually, there was support from at least one of the consultants who was part of the stakeholder group that having a standard condition that an applicant can elect to identify as one that would be in effect for the project as an available requirement, can be something that's helpful in some circumstances. So, but we're not recommending that it be pursued at this time.
Yeah, I didn't mean it to sound like we just came up with this and it
Yeah,
goes to anyone. It was in response to us trying to figure out what else anybody could think of to try to
Yeah.
help and address it. So
Yeah,
thanks,
no
Kirsten.
criticism. I just clarifying a
You're
little
welcome.
bit, sort of some of the background.
I think that's important. Thank you. So we're okay on that? Keep
Yeah.
going? Okay.
Yep.
Then we have a couple items that, again, this is the assigning a single statewide Act 250 coordinator, so one coordinator to develop particular expertise in the area of wood products manufacturing sector issues. But I think everyone kind of agreed that a general permit specialist could support some of the same objectives. It was not seen as, I believe, Kirsten and I believe that having training of all of our district coordinators on specific issues would be a better approach, given the number of applications that we get a year and being able to also honor the idea of the district coordinator in that area of the state being able to, have that kind of, regional aspect to it.
Yeah.
So,
Kirsten,
Okay, I'll just mention quickly that I did connect with Pete Gill, our executive director, who supervises all of the coordinators about this concept. And I don't want to paraphrase Pete, but feel free to jump in here if you like. But this wasn't seen as a path that was desirable due to just sort of operational factors.
Alex.
Yeah, I'll just add in real quickly there. Agree with what Brooke was saying previously, that it would be better to have all of the coordinators able to address this particular sector in a meaningful way and make sure that they're all trained for that purpose.
Yeah, thank you. Alex.
Well, just to play devil's advocate, the number of applications we get for wood products manufacturers are very small every year, right? And I know from my own past experience that whenever you have to do a review of something or even just a project that you only do once in a great while, it can be slow and it can be hard to hit the right marks because you just don't do it very often. So I part of me is attracted to this idea, but I respect, programmatic considerations and wanting to make sure everybody's on the same page and that the local knowledge base that the district coordinators are is respected. I wonder though if there's some way to have our cake and eat it too on this one, to have the district coordinator in the particular area still be the one processing these kinds of applications. But if there could be one specific person in the organization that is also consulted on all of these, so that maybe there is still one person who sees all of them and can give some advice on what works and what doesn't work. after the training is done. Because I agree, Pete, that once the training happens, everybody should be good, right? But then you don't see one of these applications for 3 years, and that training was a long time ago. And so I don't know. I'm not wedded to this, and I'm happy to keep it on the we're not recommending it list, but I'm just curious if there might be a middle ground.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
and one
Alex.
area of potential middle ground there, Alex, would be to make sure that our state coordinator is kept up abreast of this and able to continue making sure that the training is happening, on a regular basis for all the coordinators.
And consulting when these come up, sure. Okay, Brooke, next one.
Okay, E was sector-specific outreach for wood products, by A&R. And because they had some brewery day events in the past, so there was a suggestion that something similar happen. And A&R will consider offering, events based on resources available and their competing priorities, et cetera. So, we're not specifically recommending that and leaving it up to A&R. And then F is A&R to adopt a permit fast lane, and that's just not similar to, I guess, where we're at on the Act 250 application. There are a lot of competing priorities for that, so that is not being recommended. G is the Act 250 jurisdictional trigger to the 10-acre town standard that we did talk about some last time and then earlier here. Do we want to see what Oliver has to add to that?
Do you have anything on this one?
He had to leave at 2 p.m., I believe, so he's
Oh,
no
is
longer on
Catherine-
the call.
Oh, oh, right,
Cat-
okay.
Is Catherine here? Maybe Catherine has some comments on that? Or did she have to leave
Hi.
too?
No,
Oh,
I
hi.
am here, but I think we'll wait for our written comments that Oliver will be submitting.
Okay, thank you.
Hmm. So, do we want to talk more about this item G, or,
I think we
Yeah.
talked about it last time. And Sarah, go ahead.
So I think my need for more information sort of overlaps the two of these, because I think the prevalence of wood product manufacturers that occur in 1-acre towns seems relatively high. And just trying to understand a bit more about what, I think there's like 20% of them were triggered just jurisdictionally in terms of 1-acre town, which would mean that you're seeing wood projects manufacturing on less than 10 acres. And just drilling down and getting some more information about, if we choose to do the definition where pulp manufacturing and log storage are no longer considered part of wood products manufacturing, perhaps no longer jurisdictional, does that solve the problem? I don't necessarily disagree with, I don't necessarily agree with the statement here about development seeks the path of least regulatory resistance when it comes to wood product manufacturing. I don't see, with economic viabilities, people shrinking things down to avoid it. So I think this was just an area that I felt like it would be great to get some more information before we took this wholesale off the table.
So it could be combined with the previous and set it up for more study. Or we could keep it as a separate, instead of totally combining the two questions, just keep it as separate, but say that it's something that we may be looking into.
Do you want to break it out into like a third section? To kind of have, these are the things we recommend, these are the things we're not recommending at this time, these are the things we're continuing to look into.
Don't know. Brooke,
Wanted to ask Sarah, what information is it that you want to look at that you're referring to?
So if we're saying, I think it was in rural areas, 59% of the so-called 1 acre towns lack both. So there's a high prevalence of these wood product manufacturings being in the 1 acre towns. And I think it was stated in the report that there's about 20% that just pull the jurisdictional trigger because they're less than 10 acres in a 1 acre town. And trying to understand how these things are interrelated. It might be that one of the options previously mentioned in the report sort of solves the issue in terms of taking smaller projects that, except for the 1 acre threshold, would not be in Act 250. Maybe we solve that issue by changing the definition and taking out wood pulp and log storage. It might not, and in which case, you know, what's triggering this? Is it then Stony Brook? If these people had asked, these applicants had asked for a Stony Brook decision, would that have triggered Act 250? And so I think just answering a little bit more of the questions would then say that, you know what, this is moot. This would not accomplish anything because we're solving these things over here. But I just think that it's because there's 59% of wood product manufacturing are in 1 acre towns. It just would be good to like completely close the door on this one way or another with a little bit of supplemental information.
and can I just clarify, Sarah, you don't mean that we need to get that answer before June 30th and include it in this report? Correct. So you're not asking that this report resolve those questions. You're just suggesting that there could be some more exploration of this question. Did somebody start to say something?
Yeah, it's okay. I just,
Okay,
we can talk about it another time. It's not important.
okay.
Whoops. Okay, whoops.
H.
H. So this is exemption of small scale wood product manufacturing facilities below some kind of limited or set threshold. So for example, based on volume of or output, how many days of operation, and this again would be to establish a new exemption, but it would be like a subset of the wood product manufacturers with a noise standard. And this would require statutory change in rulemaking to effectuate this kind of alteration. That was something that we didn't necessarily feel like it would have much meaningful impact. If we're already dealing with a very small number to begin with, how many applications would this really touch? I think was one concern. And could be considered in the future, but not within the confines of this study.
Alex.
I think this is good language for this item in the report. My initial reaction was there got to be some small ones that really shouldn't be in Act 250, and the provision in statute that makes wood product manufacturers a minor does have some bright lines in terms of volumes and such, and so it's not like that hasn't been addressed already in some respects. It's just, is there an even lower tier, for that cordwood processor who, is more than just a backyard operation, but is really not of the scale that deserves an Act 250 permit. So that's where I was going. I was like, hey, let's think more, but I think it's worded properly. It leaves the door open for us to go there. But I think Brooke's point is probably the most important, and that's, there's so few of these applications that even if we went there, it would be a lot of administrative work to help who knows, maybe one applicant over the next 5 years. I'm not sure that's moving the needle for wood products manufacturers.
And just the way you put that, Alex, I think comes back to the question that Kirsten asked us a few minutes ago. Should there be 3 separate categories? And I think not. I think leaving it the way it is fine, and not making a new category for the maybe laters. So I think we're all right the way it is, Kirsten.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye. So I is the notion of trying to create pre-approved sites. And it's, I think, a bridge too far. I mean, citing of these kinds of projects is, very complex, or can be. And the notion that, well, and in terms of any kind of planning resources, FPR does not have the resources at this point available to do this kind of, future planning kind of thing. So while it sounds like a wonderful idea, the logistics of it and the resources are just really not available to be able to accomplish this, at least at this time, we don't believe.
Okay. We sort of skipped over the background sections of the report that described the methodology, timeline, and statutory charge. And let's just ask board members whether they're comfortable with the earlier sections of the report in that way.
I had a few comments / questions in that earlier part of the report that I'd be happy to just rattle off for Kirsten
Sure.
and Brooke's benefit and making revisions.
Go
That'd
ahead.
be great.
Okay, so I am on page 4, which is the report background and summary of recommendations. It's towards the end of that section. And on page 4, the 4th bullet down mentions the Stony Brook concept. And I think this is the first use of the word Stony Brook in the report. And Janet may have called this out when we talked about this last time, but we just need a footnote. In my mind, if it's going to stay in, we need a footnote on this page that explains briefly what Stony Brook means. Because when I was first reading this, I had no idea, and that question popped into my head. So I imagine a legislator reading this would ask the same question. So a simple footnote would solve that.
Or if I may, just even a sentence, and parenthesize the Stony Brook moniker for it. But the idea behind Stony Brook is a smaller area of jurisdiction, and establishing that as part of the permit. So just saying that in plain language, and then referring to the Environmental Board Stony Brook decision as reference.
Yep, that would probably be the better way to do it, only because right now there's a very long footnote on this page, so you probably don't want another one. So yeah, that's Janet's solution is more elegant. So now I'm on page 5. This is section 3A, survey results. The second paragraph, which starts, while the survey asked questions and invited feedback. This is just grammar. Sorry to give you a comment like this, but that's one paragraph and one sentence. I would recommend breaking it up. It's just a run-on sentence. No, it's not unintelligible. Just a little bit of breaking it up. Okay. The next one was there a next one? Sorry, I'm going down my version of the document with little comments sprinkled across it. Okay, page 8. Bottom of page 8, very last bullet. Yeah, that last bullet starts impact of Act 250 on logging and forestry due to Act 250 permit conditions. And my note is that that bullet seems repetitive given the one above it. Maybe you could delete that bullet. So that's editorial. Take it or leave it. Don't need to discuss it, but that was my comment on
Or-
that.
Alternatively on that, you could just take out the last sentence, 2 sentences of the bullet previous, because that's the redundant part.
Starting with this is particularly concerning
Yeah,
for parcels.
yeah.
Yeah. Got it.
That's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Sarah, do you have any comments? I may have a few grammatical comments that I can just transmit offline
That'd be
to
great. Thanks.
Kirsten. Okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Which I
Yeah.
don't know if we're gonna be able to answer, but the item, I think it's G, that's currently within the section of the draft report as an item that the board will not be pursuing and recommending to advance at this time. Which is the 1 acre, 10 acre, it's the concept of for wood products manufacturing, treat all the towns as if they're 10 acre towns. Was the board wanting to put that alongside the section of the report that, and the item that is the concerns
asking.
the log and pulp yards?
I'd say
So
keep
that-
them separate.
Okay, keep them separate, but
Yeah.
keep them also where they are currently within the draft report. Because one of them is,
Yeah.
this will be taken up, and the other one will, the wording will change, and maybe Sarah and I could connect further as well. But it's still not really clear to me if we want, which section of the report we want to put it in. Are
Yeah.
you, so I'm interpreting Janet saying like leave them where they are currently.
Yeah. Alex.
Yeah, I'm on that same wavelength. I like where it is. I'm not partial to that recommendation in any case, but deferring to Sarah on like more information is better before passing final judgment. I'm fine with that. And you can revise the words to say that a bit in G, but for me, I think it's appropriate where it is now. Honestly, I feel like there's a much larger question with regard to the Stony Brook conversation and areas of impact versus parcel size that I want to get to someday, but that's not specific to wood products manufacturing. So
Sarah.
So I think that everything from my perspective, at least on G, could be tied up by saying that additional research will be made in the other recommended categories. Because I think that there's ability to address the same concerns of G by further refining some of the work under some of the other ones that we have selected to pursue. So I think just saying that we understand this, and the reason why this, one of the reasons why we're not selecting it is because we believe that there are other things that we have selected to advance looking at that would also solve the concerns of everything listed in G, if that sounds all right.
Okay. Kirsten. Do you want to reach out to Sarah for any more clarification on that?
Yeah, if Sarah,
fine.
you
Okay.
could be available for that, that would be great. And
Okay.
I'm understanding that we will be continuing the board's review of this draft on Thursday this week. So hopefully by then we'll have some more final draft content.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering too, what format would the board like to receive that in? Should I provide a red line strikeout kind of
Yeah.
version, or maybe one we could go through together during that meeting?
Yeah, I think a red line version, and presumably you're going to get Oliver's written comments as soon as possible. I don't know if Catherine, you can remind him to purvey those as soon as possible after this meeting, so that
Of
Kirsten
course.
has time to look at them and provide some kind of response ahead of the public notice for our meeting on Thursday. So she would need to probably get to that by end of day tomorrow, or actually by afternoon tomorrow.
Yeah, we will be working on it and get it to her as soon as we can.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
and I will envision, with the exception of some wording for item G, for which I'll be in contact with Sarah, but for other elements of the report, I would hope to continue coordinating also with Brooke, which I think that's okay. Like,
As long as there aren't 3 board members working together on the document at
right,
once.
that's what I'm getting at. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, we didn't need more time other than a minute on that. Oh, we didn't even need, yeah, we're ahead of time again. So we have discussion of board organizational structure, policies, and procedures, and this is sort of following on other questions that have arisen over the course of the last few months, and our new, as we've tried to figure out exactly what our new roles are. So, Sarah, do you want to try to frame this discussion?
Sure, I'll take the 10,000-foot level.
Okay.
As at least as I understand things, and drill it down in
Yeah.
terms of one of the things that we have to work on are rules of procedure, and we have to develop a way to remove ourselves as well. That was something that we started on from sort of day one with the new board, and we have a whole bunch of legacy things to be working through, to rules. I think we just noted some of the rules and the wood products that perhaps need revisiting amongst others. And as I was doing research with the communications, there's other policy and guidance that's sort of dated. And so here we are as a new board operating a new fashion with a lot of this legacy policy behind us. I think one of the things that we've asked of legal counsel is to look into our procedural rules that are existing and see if we can start with a clean slate, if we have to amend those, because that will get at a lot of sort of how we operate in our rules and parameters around that. I think as we were beginning to figure out how we operate, I think Alex put this at one point in terms of a ministerial capacity, and feel free to jump in because I think you had some really good words. I remember at one point, Alex, the sort of ministerial versus the HR side. We have an org chart that sort of works for all the above, but when you get into the specifics of HR, it's not necessarily specific to that. And that an org chart is really meant for that overall, as opposed to not necessarily the specifics of a particular branch of what we do, whether it's legal or HR or something of that kin.
Can I jump
is
in
that-
for a second
yeah.
there, Sarah? So I think one of the things that occurred to me last week is that we have an organizational chart that that we have on our website, and we also have an organizational chart that it's called that HR sort of looks at and, you know, has us submit with certain HR documentation that we have to submit on a regular basis. And I think we're talking about two different charts. One is an HR chart or, a personnel chart, and the other is an organizational chart that sort of tries to model the different programmatic aspects of our program, right? The different aspects of our program. So, and, we shouldn't conflate the two. One is a response to administrative rules and procedures that we must follow due to us being a part of the state government and having personnel. And the other is, how does this board envision implementing Act 250? And what kind of structure do we need to do it in a way that that we find to be the most appropriate way to do that? So sorry to interject that, but it just sort of occurred to me last week that we're talking about two things here and maybe conflating them. Sarah.
I think that in creating the procedural rules or amending them, whichever direction we need to go in, I think we can address some of those concerns and issues. I think the problem is the absence of having specifics to work with right now, and the lack of clarity. So I'm hopeful that we can maybe add those to part of the discussion on procedural rules. And I don't know if that's something that the board might want to try and take up again sooner rather than later. I know we have a lot on our legal counsel's plates right now with different, all of our different projects combined, but that might be something that might help.
Any other input from other board members at this time on those questions?
Yeah, I'll chime in, Janet. Two things. One, it has felt odd that I think it was day one, or maybe it was day two, I forget, that we reviewed the prior board's rules of procedures document and were prepared to just acknowledge we were following it. And then we didn't, because I think there was a realization that it was portions of it just didn't apply anymore. And so, like Sarah said, it's awkward to be in a place where we have an old rules of procedure. We're trying to respect it, but we know that we can't follow it, all of its provisions, because the statute has changed and our organization has. So yeah, I don't see problems per se. I just feel like from an administrative standpoint, it's awkward. And I guess what I'm saying is I would kind of like to get to it sooner rather than later. I would like to hear, doesn't have to be right now, from the legal team as to a recommendation of whether to just throw it out and start fresh, or to try to get in and nitpick each little section and bring it up to date. I tend to think that it's better to start fresh, given that it's a pretty different organizational structure than what the Natural Resources Board had previously. But yeah, I think if we were to pursue this stepwise in a fashion that would make me a little more satisfied, it would be getting a recommendation from legal sooner rather than later on a way to proceed. That first question being maybe the first one to answer, is whether we just chuck what's there and start over, or start making suggestions for revisions along the way. The second point I wanted to make was that this organizational chart business, I think, Brooke, you had suggested, like, when we had talked about HR related things, that it would be good to recognize that the board chair is from a personnel standpoint, is the person that handles staff evaluations and that sort of thing. And that right now, the organizational chart that we use sort of implies it's the full board. So I wonder if there's a way to just put an asterisk in our organizational org chart that clarifies that, so it doesn't change the chart. It still shows the full board as being responsible for the oversight of the Act 250 program. I think that's the legislative intent. But have an asterisk that you could then go to that says, but the board chair, per personnel rules is, I'm not sure how to word it, but is in charge of staff annual evaluations and other sensitive personnel matters, et cetera, something like that. So that to try to, I'm blabbering, sorry, but to try to hit your point, Brooke, about like, let's be clear about who the top line supervisor is versus the fact that the board is actually charged with running the organization, even if we're not charged, all of us are not charged with, staff evaluations and resolving discipline matters and that sort of thing.
And, there is some gray area there too, Alex, because the executive director serves at the pleasure of the board and as an exempt employee isn't subject to the same sort of strict procedures, HR procedures that most of our other staffers are. So there is some room to, examine what the board's relationship to our executive director is. Brooke.
Going back to the discussion on the rules of procedure that exist. That was back when there were multiple boards, water
panels,
resources
yeah.
board, yeah. And I guess I would like to see us define what we're talking about putting in rules versus guidance documents versus policy or whatever, because I don't see the rules of procedure of the NRB or now the LURB to be having anything to do with how we function internally in terms of how the board governs. It certainly is like, it's more of an outward facing, like, how do you do your job in public? And, if we have a small quasi judicial function now still. But that to me is not where the understanding would be put in terms of how this board is going to work operationally and who has authority or who doesn't. So I think that we're talking about two separate functions or jobs or tasks.
Yeah.
And where I think the first step really is to try to define where the rules, guidance, whatever it is, which category are we putting it in? I think that might be useful.
I couldn't agree more, Brooke. That's a really good point. Now that we've become a little more schooled on how cumbersome or involved rulemaking is, like, I agree. There are things in those procedures that don't feel like rulemaking, and if legal staff agrees that we can jettison the entire package of rules and replace them with a combination of guidance documents, policies, and then some formal rules. For example, the rules to remove us as board members, that I think per statute has to be a rule, right?
Yeah.
I agree, Brooke. I think that would be a nice little exercise and maybe, legal staff, maybe they could help us, or one of us could team with them to help walk through the old rules of procedures and just label each one, like that's actually policy, or that's a guidance, and then, oh, here's a real rule item, and then we could know what the real universe is.
Yeah, because there's like a hierarchy, right? Rules are the equivalent of law.
Yeah.
And, policies and guidance, not so much, but you better follow them if you put them in place, that kind of thing. So that would be, I'd be happy to work with whoever wants to put their heads together on it, if the board wants to be engaged in that process collaboratively with our council.
Rachel?
I just want to clarify something that Alex said a few minutes ago. In the January 28th board meeting earlier this year, you did all approve that the board would operate under all the previous rules, guidelines, policies, and procedures of the Natural Resources Board until that such time as those are amended. So the rules of procedure you should be following, and I'm not a legal expert, but we have a couple on this phone call. I just want to make sure that I'm reflecting back to those meeting minutes.
Thank you, Rachel, because I did not have that specific memory, but now that you remind me, that sounds right, and the minutes would indicate it. So, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, for some reason I thought maybe we had pulled back on that, but I guess what we had pulled back on was whether to update them. That's
or
what
to
we decided.
jettison them, or to jettison them, some of them.
Right.
I mean, so it's that one, now I can't remember whether it's rules or policy, but the one that refers to completely outdated board structure, where you had a land use review panel and a water resources panel. And there was a bunch of procedural, language in there about what to do in cases that aren't at all relevant to this board, and not much else, as I recall. And so that particular document didn't seem at all relevant to the current board setup. Sarah?
So I had already volunteered to work on this, and I believe Rebecca's the attorney that's working on it. I think Kirsten may have been the second board member, but let you and Brooke figure out, so we don't go to the 3 members and need to have a formal subcommittee. I still do want to stick on this because I think that there's some good ways to straighten some things out between the rules and the policies, and had already begun to sort of put some work into sort of sketching things out a little bit. But I think that it's, where does the board want to see this in terms of prioritization with everything else that we have on our plate right now?
Good question. Brooke?
I'm trying to remember. So yeah, but I think that Sarah and I have been working on different aspects of this. I have been working on guidance for, litigation. When do we get involved in cases at all, since we don't have to, as well as how do we settle cases, as well as what is the oversight responsibility? How could that, to make sure that our decisions, while we respect jurisdiction and authority of our people, we still get consistent work product. So I think that's pretty different than what Sarah, as I understood, was working more on, like rules of procedure for meetings and, other things like that. So I'm not sure. I think we're okay if we stay in our silos on this, and then they could be married later, or,
Married again.
yeah, or, one is rules, one isn't, or however that sugars off. The other thing I just wanted to say in terms of, yeah, we are subject to any rules that the prior boards have put into play, unless and until we do something to revoke them. So I'm not sure that I don't remember like voting, maybe we did, we're going to follow all the rules, but that would be required. And unless there were, I don't know what you do to revoke rules. But I think that, we have to follow whatever is enacted and exists, except if it doesn't apply and it's no longer viable, but there are still many sections of the rules that are viable and we are following them, you know.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that was an open question, Brooke. When we had our first meeting, there was my recollection is there was some comment from staff that maybe we needed legislative technical correction to clarify that the Land Use Review Board could or would follow the rules of the board, the Natural Resource Board, which ceased to exist. I think there's some legal question about whether when a board ceases to exist, the rules that it was operating under also cease to exist. And that has very little import with regard to the rules of procedure, which is just like a 15-page document. I just looked at it again from that January meeting, and I think I think Sarah, you and legal could very easily update that without having to derail our other efforts. It's the rules, it's the more substantive Act 250 rules, which were last revised 10 years ago, that are much more extensive, and the program would not run properly if we weren't using them, if we weren't, abiding by them, even though they were created by a board that doesn't exist anymore. So I'm not talking about those rules. I'm talking about the rules of procedure, that 15-page document. And so, Sarah, your question about like, where does the board want to go? Do we want to do this now, or do we want to wait until we have more bandwidth? Again, maybe I'm being a little too cheeky about it or black and white, but it seems like 15-page document, several pages of which are about water resource panels that don't exist anymore. I think we could do that now. I think we could update that now and include in that the formal rule that we do have to figure out at some point, which is how to get rid of me if I keep talking for too long at meetings and you all agree that I need to go. You got to figure that rule out.
That wasn't one of the, you want us to add that to the list of, reasons that we can remove someone, Alex? You talk too much?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. Absolutely.
No, that wasn't one of them. And I think, this stuff that Brooke described that she's working on, that can be a separate kind of policy. The rules of procedure can be another. And then the rules of removal, the question was, should that be combined with rules of procedure or not? And Rebecca was going to be looking into where exactly the Green Mountain Care Board was in their process for adopting that as rule. And to help us answer that question as to whether it should be standalone or should be part of the rules of procedure that Sarah and I actually were working on early on. So, and then Alex just mentioned that, there may need to be a little bit of a legislative fix. And as I recall, Allison, I see you have shown your face, maybe that was something you were going to pipe in on, but that in the list of technical fixes and other amendments that staff and previous board members had worked on was a technical fix regarding adoption of the rules of the NRB by the LURB. Is that not right, Allison? Am I remembering correctly?
I guess I was just coming off to say maybe we could table some of this discussion until like maybe at least this Wednesday. I know, Rebecca we weren't necessarily preparing to talk about these issues with the rules today under this agenda, but I think she has been working on it. There were some questions about there was some discussion about prioritizing that versus other deliverables. And I think she's been more focused on some
the
other
RPC stuff,
matters,
the regional plan review. Yeah. So,
but we're happy to work with you all on those. And there are definitely some areas for legal advice and maybe a refresher on some of the legal implications of rules and the process for repealing rules, et cetera. There's sometimes rules they're abrogated as a matter of law when the authority for them goes away, but we can talk more at a later date or give you some counsel in executive session as well.
Okay. Okay, Kirsten.
I was just gonna say, Sarah, that I hadn't recalled that you and I were gonna be working together on rules of procedure, and Janet has now remembered that it's her. I'm happy to do that if I'm happy to be looped in and assist with that if either of you would like. Yeah, it's an important topic. The one thing that's kind of a little bit tangential, but to me related to all of this is, we got this HR training that clearly defined, the board, the chair has this certain responsibility with evaluations and personnel matters. And then there are these different components of our work that it's the full board has responsibility for. And then in my mind, there's still kind of like a bunch of stuff that's sort of in between. And as we gain experience and encounter maybe some of these specific activities, I think it would be helpful to come up with our own maybe other protocols around how we might work together on different items. And I don't see this as necessarily, rule, policy, guidance. It's just our own internal kind of working protocols. So we can kind of put a pin on things as we maybe encounter them and discuss them so that we're all understanding and kind of on the same page.
I totally agree with that. There's definitely, there are things in the law that are dedicated to the board or the chair by statute, but then there's also, it doesn't spell out all of the ways in which you're going to be doing your day-to-day work. So I definitely think there's a lot of decisions for this point, for this board about the practicalities of how you're going to do your business. Brooke.
I just want to thank Allison and our legal staff for handling a whole lot of stuff that's getting thrown at them from all different sides. When, as Alex W. said to us long ago, it's like we're drinking out of a fire hose, and now I feel like we've passed the fire hose to our lawyers. So I just want to thank them publicly for being Johnny on the spot and turning around a lot of requests in fast succession, because I really appreciate all of the requests that I've made, Kirsten's made, and I know that there are a lot of competing interests here, so I appreciate their hard work on that.
Thank you.
Alex.
I just want to reiterate, well, first of all, yes, kudos to legal staff. Thank you. Keep it up. And then I want to second what Kirsten said, which is I think there's a middle ground, that we should strive for. And I think that applies to you, Janet, too, as the chair, in your in the roles that you alone have to satisfy or work on. In that the HR training seemed to me to indicate that you did have some discretion with regard to sharing things that were that with the board that might be helpful for the running the organization. So I'm not suggesting that you say anything or share anything that's inappropriate, but rather if there's an organizational challenge that stems from a personnel issue, some level of general explanation to the board about what that challenge is really important for the other four of us to be able to understand and have an intelligent conversation about how we change things organizationally, without being specific about one person or one position. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think Kirsten talked about that a little bit in our HR training, like that kind of question is something that she sees the board having appropriate responsibility for. Well, have we talked this one out for the day? maybe some of us will sort of reconnect with our earlier efforts on some of this. And yeah. So now we're back ahead of time. Discussion and possible action on appeals, enforcement, and attorney-client memoranda.
Yeah, I'll make a motion on that front.
Thank you.
So I'll make a motion that the board enter executive session to discuss pending and probable Act 250 appeals and enforcement, and to have confidential attorney-client communications, and that premature public knowledge of these matters would place the board at a substantial disadvantage.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Brooke. Any discussion? Okay, hearing and seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. We will leave this meeting and return after our executive session. Thank you. Okay, all 5 board members are here. Back from the executive session. We are recording, I believe, right, Maddie?
Yes.
Thank you. And I believe we have a motion, Brooke.
I move to oppose the judgment order proposed by appellants in docket number 22-ENV-119 and to pursue a dismissal of the appeal.
A
Second.
Thank you. Oh, Kirsten got it first. Any discussion? No, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That is a unanimous, the motion is passed. And I believe we have another motion, Alex.
Yes, I move to authorize enforcement staff to transmit a proposed civil citation to the respondent in enforcement case 2025_006.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Brooke. Any discussion? No, so all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That is 5 again, a unanimous motion, or the motion is passed unanimously. Sarah?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Oh, wow. Quick on the heels there.
Second.
Thank you, Brooke. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned at 3:21 PM on June 2nd. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.